My parents kicked me out because of my sister. 6 years later, they're asking for help to support her and her 4 young children. I'm 32 female, and I'm currently in charge of significant commercial development projects around New England as a successful architect at a prominent Boston firm. Nathan, a 34-year-old man who works as a project manager in sustainable development, is my FIANC. Our wedding is scheduled for the following year. On the surface, my life appears to be ideal. I have rewarding work, a wonderful relationship. However, I'm questioning everything because of a complex family situation that recently reached a breaking point. I must go into great depth about my family history for you to comprehend the current situation. I was raised in a Connecticut suburb in an upper-middle-class household. My mother, Phoebe, 56, taught high school at a private school until she left 6 years ago, and my father, Richard, 58, works as a corporate lawyer at a reputable business. Ashley, my younger sister, 30, has always been the star of our family. Favoritism was evident from my earliest recollections, even though my parents would strongly dispute it if questioned. I received consecutive A's on my report card when I was 8 and Ashley was 6, and I was simply informed, "That's expected of you," while Ashley received B's and was commended and brought out for ice cream because she was trying her best. Throughout our childhood this trend persisted. Ashley's meager efforts were widely praised, while my accomplishments were anticipated and frequently disregarded. When I was 15, I recall one specific occurrence. I had been working on my design project for months, frequently staying up until 2 a.m. in preparation for a national high school architectural competition. I received a minor scholarship as a result of placing second nationally. Ashley had an ordinary soccer match that day, so my parents didn't even make it to the award ceremony. "That's nice," they replied, barely taking their eyes off the television, as I brought my award home before turning back to Ashley's dramatic account of how she nearly scored a goal. Even though my parents were clearly biased, I did well in school and in my personal life. I led multiple community service projects, kept a 4.0 GPA, and served as president of the student body. In the meantime, as Ashley approached adolescence, her actions became more alarming. When she began to slip out at night, she was caught stealing high-end makeup when she was 15, and they accused me of not providing her my allowance money even though she clearly needed it. The assumption that I should put Ashley's needs ahead of my own was the most annoying aspect, not only of the partiality, but of everything. My part-time job at a local design firm, where I made coffee and filed papers, allowed me to save up $3,000 when I was 16. I intended to use it for a Columbia University summer architecture course. My parents, however, borrowed my money to assist with repairs after Ashley, who wasn't supposed to be driving, smashed her boyfriend's car. They never fulfilled their commitment to reimburse me, and I lost the chance to improve my college applications and the summer program opportunity. I was able to gain admission to a prominent architectural program in spite of these obstacles. In order to save money, my parents agreed to let me live at home while I was in college and assist with my tuition. They wanted me around to help handle Ashley. I recall making several attempts to speak with Ashley about her actions. One exchange is particularly memorable. About 3 months later, everything collapsed. At 3:00 a.m. on a school night, I discovered her sneaking back into the house. Assisting Ashley to climb through the window, I whispered, "Ashley, you need to be more careful. You're in your senior year, and colleges look at more than just grades." She retorted, "Stop trying to be mom. Just because your life is boring and all about buildings doesn't mean mine has to be." In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. Ashley spent a lot of time with Tyler, her 17-year-old ex-boyfriend, who was known for being trouble. My parents viewed everyone I dated with extreme mistrust, yet they were surprisingly lenient about their relationship. My mother accused me of being envious of Ashley's vibrant social life, when I attempted to voice my concerns about Tyler. 6 years ago, everything drastically changed. One day, Ashley, a senior in high school at the time, came home and declared that she was expecting a child. The father was Tyler. I can still clearly recall that night, Ashley sitting on the couch with a look of fear and defiance on her face, my father pacing the living room, and my mother sobbing uncontrollably. In the confusion that ensued, my parents somehow twisted the facts to accuse me of failing to keep a closer eye on her. My mother arrived in my room the following day with news that would forever alter my course in life. Without even looking at me, she stated, "You have to move out by the end of the week." I couldn't understand why. I said, "With Tyler moving in and a baby on the way, the house isn't large enough." I made an effort to reason with her. During my third year of college, I worked part-time at a nearby architecture business and maintained a 3.9 GPA. She insisted on finding me a cheap apartment close to the university. The worst thing was when my father summoned me to his home office the next day. He delivered another hit while seated behind his enormous oak desk, which he had always used to frighten clients. "We won't be able to continue your tuition," he said in a cold, clinical tone. "That money is necessary for Ashley and the child. You'll figure something out." I stood there looking at the man who had always emphasized the value of education and accountability, suddenly severing his daughter's ties after she had done everything right. The irony hurt. I packed my things that evening. My father stopped me in the driveway as I was packing the final box into my car. I briefly believed that he might reconsider. Instead, he gave me a piece of paper with a list of local women's shelters on it. "Just in case," he said before going back inside. The next phase of my life was the darkest. For 4 months I lived in my car and, for safety, parked every night in a different Walmart lot. At the architecture firm where I worked part-time, I would change in public toilets, take a shower in the campus gym, and keep my business attire in my locker. I took a second job working as a late-night barista, frequently juggling multiple jobs while attending classes. I asked a few family members for assistance, but they all turned me down. My 53-year-old Aunt Susan, who had always expressed her pride in my accomplishments, informed me that she didn't want to become embroiled in family strife. According to my grandparents, they were too old to handle the matter. I occasionally went days without eating a decent meal, barely making it on protein bars and coffee. I frequently slept at my desk while working on my homework in the college library, which was open 24 hours a day. I kept my GPA the same in spite of everything. My escape was architecture. I put all of my suffering and willpower into my designs. My parents never once called to see whether I was still alive during this time. Ashley didn't either. After learning that she had given birth to a boy, I made one phone call, but it was awkward and short. After that, there was no communication for 6 years. I had to start over in my life. Throughout those 6 years, despite working 60-hour weeks and living in my car and then a small room in a dubious area of town, I finished with honors. A famous Boston firm was interested in my final thesis project, which was a design for a sustainable community center with transitional housing that received multiple prizes. Living in a small studio apartment and trying to save as much money as I could, I began my career as an entry-level architect. Every advancement was a triumph over my past. I was managing my own projects for 4 years. My area of expertise was sustainable commercial development, and I gained recognition for my creative ideas that put the needs of people and the environment first. 3 years ago, Nathan and I met at a seminar on sustainable development. During the Q and a portion of his presentation on green construction projects, I disputed one of his claims. He invited me to continue the conversation over coffee. Rather than becoming defensive, dinner evolved from that coffee into the most wholesome and encouraging relationship I've ever experienced. Nathan is well aware of my background. He was present when I purchased my first home after being expelled. When I signed the paperwork and broke down because I was so overcome by the fact that I finally had a place where no one could make me leave, he supported my idea to refurbish it and make it an environment that reflected all of my accomplishments over the years. Through mutual contacts, I occasionally learned tidbits about Ashley's life. Shortly after the birth of their baby, she wed Tyler, but the two of them split up after 6 months. By that time, she was expecting her second child, but the father had entirely vanished after learning of the pregnancy. She had another child with Marcus, the man she married 2 years later, but their marriage failed when she had an affair. She is now pregnant once more and doesn't seem to know who the father is. I got a call yesterday from an unidentified number right before bed. After 6 years of stillness, my mother called. She initially pretended nothing had happened, inquiring about my life and showing interest in my accomplishments. I briefly felt like that young child again, excited to tell my mother about my achievements. I even began to tell her about my recent promotion to senior architect and my engagement. Then she revealed the true reason she had called: in order to assist Ashley and her kids. My parents want me to return to Connecticut. They say they're too old to care for 4 small children, and my father will shortly be retiring. They even had the gall to claim that as the successful sister, it is my duty to support the family. My mother said, "You've always been the responsible one. Now more than ever, Ashley needs her big sister. Family must remain united." A chilly chuckle erupted within me. "Family has to stick together," I said. When I was sleeping in my car, where was this family? When I was barely eating and working 2 jobs, where was this family? When there was nobody for me to turn to. I went on despite my mother's attempt to stop me. "You absolutely abandoned me, kicked me out and stopped paying for my schooling in order to help Ashley. You expect me to sacrifice my life, career, and relationship in order to clean up your mess once more now that she has continued to make bad decisions and you're sick of dealing with the fallout." I hung up after telling her that I would never again risk my life for Ashley. Since then, family members who turned down my request for assistance 6 years ago have been bombarding my phone with messages, accusing me of being callous and asserting that family helps family. Nathan completely agrees with my decision to uphold my boundaries, but other people argue that since they are still family and retaliation won't. But this doesn't seem like vindictiveness to me. I see it as defending the life I created on my own after being deserted by those who were meant to keep me safe. Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their tremendous support and wisdom. My phone has been buzzing non-stop with messages from extended family members for the past 48 hours, which has been very taxing. The circumstances have changed in unexpected ways. My mother wrote me a long email detailing Ashley's children's daily problems along with comprehensive pictures of my nieces and nephews. The oldest, who is currently in kindergarten, is exhibiting early behavioral problems. The second child's health issues necessitate regular medical care. Another is on the way, while the third is still a toddler. A communication from an old family friend, who teaches at Ashley's old high school, was what really got to me. She informed me that, in order to pay for Ashley's costs and medical bills, my parents have been taking out loans. My father has delayed his retirement indefinitely, and they have already remortgaged their home. Ashley personally sent a direct message, which was the most unexpected development. She reached out for the first time in 6 years, not to apologize, but to let her big sister know that she had changed and needed her. She talked about acknowledging her past sins and is attending therapy. Although I've seen this pattern before, I still have a part of me that wants to believe her. In order to keep both physical and emotional distance from the family, my fiancé Nathan proposed a compromise, providing financial support for the kids' schooling through a trust fund. It's an intriguing idea that would enable me to assist the defenseless kids without being embroiled in the family strife. All of this is still registering in my mind. Seeing those pictures of the children, there's an overwhelming urge to make things right, but I don't know how or if I should. Would it really be my responsibility to step in again? Should I be the one to step forward for these children? Would this ultimately validate everything my parents and Ashley put me through? I'm still torn about everything. It's been a few weeks since I last posted, and I can't tell you how much the messages and emails have weighed on me. To be honest, the pressure from my family is suffocating. Every few days there's a new message, some from my mother, some from distant cousins, and even a few from childhood friends who I haven't spoken to in years. It's like a never-ending cascade of guilt, reminders of what I should be doing and how I should be there for them. Everyone seems to have an opinion about what I should do, and no one is afraid to voice it. It's exhausting, and I'm honestly starting to feel like I'm suffocating under it all. Nathan has been wonderful. I could not ask for a better partner through all of this. He's been there for me in ways that my family never was. His calm, rational demeanor is exactly what I need right now, especially when my mind is clouded by conflicting emotions. Every time I think about what happened 6 years ago, I feel this sharp sting, like I'm still carrying this enormous weight on my back. But Nathan's been patient with me, always reminding me that I don't have to fix everything or everyone. His advice to establish boundaries has been invaluable. You can help, he tells me, but you don't have to sacrifice your life to do it. I hear him, but the ache of family ties, even those that feel like they've been severed, is hard to ignore. A few days ago, I found myself staring at the screen of my phone, holding my breath, as I looked at Ashley's message once again. It wasn't a long text, but the words stung like salt in a wound. She told me she had changed, that she was in therapy, that she wanted to be a better mother for her kids. It felt empty, almost rehearsed. I've heard it all before, haven't I? Each time Ashley hit a new rock bottom, each time she made a mess of her life, there was always this claim that this time would be different, that this time she'd turn it around. But every time it was the same thing: excuses, blame shifting, and the cycle starting again. I've lost count of how many times I've heard that line, "I've changed, really." I have, and each time it's been followed by another crisis, another mess to clean up. But this time, her message wasn't accusatory. There was no blame placed on me. She seemed genuine, almost. She even apologized for how she treated me in the past. And that, because deep down, a part of me has always wanted to believe that Ashley could change. I wanted to believe that the sister I once knew, the one I used to protect, the one I used to fight with over silly things, was still in there somewhere. Could it be that she had finally woken up to the damage she had caused, not just to me, but to herself and her children? Could she really be different this time? But even as I wrestled with that tiny spark of hope, the old wounds started to reopen. I remembered what it felt like to be abandoned, to be cast aside by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I thought of the years I spent alone, struggling, not just physically but emotionally. I had to rebuild my entire life from scratch, and it wasn't easy. It took every ounce of strength I had to survive, to push forward, to prove that I was more than just the abandoned daughter. I had to become someone who was strong enough to stand on her own 2 feet, without the support of the very people who should have been there for me. The thought of giving that up, of risking everything I've worked so hard to build, keeps me up at night. I've worked tirelessly to get to where I am, and Nathan has been right by my side the entire time, encouraging me, lifting me up. But now it feels like everything is being put to the test. My family is asking for my help, and part of me wants to give in. Part of me wants to show them that I'm not the cold, heartless person they've made me out to be. But at the same time, I know that if I do that, if I let them back into my life the way they want me to, there's a risk. There's a risk of losing everything I've fought for. I don't think I can ever go back to the person I was before. I've come too far. Nathan, as always, has been my rock. He listened to me pour out my heart, and after a long silence, he spoke up. You don't owe them anything, Kelsey, he said gently. You've given them enough chances. You've already sacrificed so much of yourself. Helping them this time should be on your terms, not theirs. Don't let them guilt you into doing something you're not comfortable with. I know he's right. But the question still lingers, what is the right thing to do? Should I help them? Should I help those innocent children who didn't ask for any of this? Should I reach out even if I'm not ready to forgive? After spending days in this mental tug of war, I decided to take a step back. I needed time to think, to breathe. I blocked the phone numbers of family members who were relentless with their messages. I didn't want to be constantly bombarded by their demands or their guilt. I knew that if I didn't take this space, I'd end up doing something I'd regret. In the meantime, I reached out to an old friend, a therapist I once saw during a particularly dark period of my life. I needed someone to help me untangle all these emotions, all this guilt. In the session, I explained everything: the phone calls, the messages, Ashley's apology, my parents' requests. And after listening to me, my therapist asked a simple question that stopped me in my tracks. What would you do if you didn't have to carry the weight of everyone else's expectations? At first, the question felt impossible. What do you mean? If I didn't have to carry their expectations? Isn't that what being family means? But then something inside me clicked. What if I didn't have to carry it? What if I could just live my life for me without the weight of my past mistakes, my family's guilt, or the sense that I was always expected to fix everything? What would that life look like? I realized that for the first time I was allowed to choose. I could help without sacrificing everything, but I didn't have to sacrifice me in the process. I could step forward and offer the children some support in a way that wouldn't compromise my own happiness or future. Perhaps a financial contribution, something that would give them the stability they needed. I could set clear boundaries. I could make sure that my help didn't come at the cost of my own well-being. It's not easy, though. There are moments when I feel that pull, that old desire to be the one who holds everything together, the one who fixes the broken pieces. But I'm learning slowly that I don't have to be that person anymore. I've already done enough. The decision isn't final yet. I'm still processing, still figuring out what it means to help while protecting myself. But I'm starting to see a way forward that doesn't involve sacrificing everything for people who have never been there for me. It's a delicate balance, but I think I'm finally starting to find it. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'm done trying to fix things that were never mine to fix. I'm going to protect myself, my future, and the life I've built. Because in the end, that's all I really have. It's been several months since I last wrote, and a lot has changed in that time. A lot within me, too. The decisions I made, the boundaries I set, and the way I chose to approach everything has shifted the course of my life in ways I didn't expect. The biggest change: I've learned how to say no, and not just to others, but to myself, to those deep, ingrained patterns of guilt, the constant need to fix everything, the urge to always be the peacemaker, the idea that I had to be the one to save people, even at the cost of my own well-being. It's hard to let go of that, but I've learned that stepping back doesn't make me selfish, it makes me human. After Ashley reached out to me again, I took a step back and reflected on everything we'd been through. Her apology had been sincere, but I had to ask myself, what did I want from this? What was I hoping for? Was I looking for closure? Was I hoping that things could magically return to how they used to be? Or was I just afraid of letting go of the past because it felt like part of my identity? I'll be honest, I was scared. Scared that if I let go of the dream of us being close again, I'd be cutting off something I had been holding on to for so long. But I realized something important: holding on to that dream was holding me back. It was keeping me tied to a version of myself I no longer recognized. I didn't write back to Ashley right away. Instead, I sat with my feelings, taking the time to really think through what I wanted. Nathan was there every step of the way, just like he always had been. I couldn't have asked for a better partner. One night, over dinner, he asked me, "Are you still carrying that weight around?" And I realized that I was. I was still carrying it, even after everything. It felt heavy, like a constant pressure I had learned to ignore, but it was still there, subtly dictating my choices. That was the moment I decided no more. I wouldn't carry their expectations anymore. I wouldn't sacrifice myself or my peace for people who had let me down time and time again. I couldn't do it. I finally replied to Ashley. It wasn't a harsh message, but it was clear. I told her I appreciated her apology, that I was glad to hear she was getting the help she needed, but I also made it clear that I couldn't step back into the old dynamic we once had. I couldn't be the person who was always there to catch her when she fell. I offered her support from a distance, some resources for her and the kids, financial help if needed, but I set clear boundaries. I didn't want to go back to being her emotional caretaker. I couldn't. Her response wasn't what I expected. There was no anger, no guilt trips, just acceptance. She thanked me for being honest and for helping from a distance. She told me she understood, even though it hurt. But for the first time, I felt like I had done the right thing. For me, as for my parents, I told them the same thing. They didn't take it well at first, but I stood firm. I explained that I couldn't keep being pulled into the chaos. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness for people who hadn't been there for me when I needed them most. It was a painful conversation, but one I knew I had to have, and they, too, came to understand. They were hurt, but they also knew deep down that they couldn't keep asking me to give up everything for them. And that's when it hit me: letting go of the past doesn't mean giving up love. It means choosing yourself. It means loving from a place of strength, not from a place of obligation or guilt. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the person I was a year ago. I've changed in ways I never thought possible, and I'm proud of that. There were moments along the way when I doubted myself, moments when I wondered if I was being too harsh, too cold. But I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is protect yourself first. Nathan and I are doing well. Better than well, actually. We've grown even closer through all of this, and I feel more secure in our relationship than I ever have before. We've been able to focus on building our future without the shadow of my past hanging over us. And as for me, I feel like I've finally come into my own. I've learned to say no, to draw clear lines, and to prioritize my happiness and well-being. And it's liberating. As for Ashley and my family, I still care about them, but I've stopped letting their drama dictate my life. I'm at peace with the distance between us. I've realized that family doesn't have to look like what you expect. It doesn't have to be blood. Family is the people who show up for you when it matters, the ones who love you without expectation, without trying to fix you. And I found that in Nathan. I found that in myself. I've learned that healing isn't just about mending old wounds. It's about letting go of the things that hurt you, of the people who can't or won't change. It's about realizing that you are worthy of love and happiness, and you don't have to earn it through sacrifice or suffering. I've come to understand that sometimes the hardest thing to do is let go, but it's also the most freeing. And now I can breathe. I'm finally living for myself.